Hello and welcome. Today we're taking a look at the new Chanel Spring Collection, and I picked up quite a bit of this collection. So we're going to go through all of the items and a few comparisons. So let's go ahead and just get started. And we are going to start off with the cheek products. So this is the new blush duo. And you can see we do have a more matte finish with this. This is called Rose Coquillage. And it does come with a half moon brush. So it comes with that, and that just fits in on the tray right on there. So let's go ahead and swatch this. So we have kind of this soft peachy shade here, followed by a rose, soft rose. I'm gonna just go ahead and make those a little bit deeper. So we'll just put a second coat on each of those. So those are the two shades separately, and then mixing them together, this is what we get. We get more of a coral. So let's look at these kind of buffed together. Here is the peachy shade by itself. That's them mixed together. And then here is the rose. So this is the blush. You can see we have a matte finish. And I think it's actually it's a really nice blush. I like this blush a lot. So let's take a look at the demos for this while we talk just a little bit about the details of this product. So it is made in France. We have an 18-month shelf life and we have 9 grams of product. And I have to say, this is a nice formula. So if they are redoing their blush formulas yet again, this would be a nice one. It's definitely better than what we have in the permanent blush range right now. It's a little bit more powdery, but it still has kind of that dry, creamy texture to it, yet it's powdery enough that it's easy to blend out and it doesn't feel dry or dusty on the skin. So I do actually really like this blush, but when I first saw photos of this, it really made me think of a couple that we already have. So let's take a look at those. The first blush that it made me think of is this one, Fleur de Printemps, from a few years ago. Now, the finish on this is going to be a bit different, but this is what it made me think of. We'll put this vertically so we can see. These are two separate shades here, and you can see that this is going to have a satin finish and then having them mixed together. So you can see overall, this is going to be a little bit peachier than the new duo. And of course it's satin instead of matte, but we do still have a pretty similar color story. Now, because this has the satin finish, it does have a little bit of a silkier texture to it than the matte, which just feels like a really nice silky powder versus the Fleur de Printemps, which has a little bit more of a silky satiny feel to it. And then I also wanted to take a look at the newest Le Beige blushes that just came out. So this one here is Coral Givre. And this one does have some shimmer in it. So this is going to be our shimmery peachy coral shade. I'm going to go ahead and put this kind of right up here so you can see how that compares. You can see it's going to be a bit more vibrant. Texturally, this has a little bit more grip to it. It has almost like a little bit more gel in the texture compared to the new duo, which just feels a little bit more powdery in comparison. This one here is Mauve Glacé, and you can see that it's not going to be a match per se, but I did want to compare this one. I'll put this here with the rose, and you can see that although they call this Mauve Glacé, it's actually kind of a little bit warmer than a traditional mauve. And it has a bit more red in it than the pink in the new duo. And then we have Rose Polaire, which is going to be our softer pink. And this is going to be a bit warmer as well. And you can see it is going to be closest to the shades when you mix the two together. So that here in the middle is going to be the closest. Now, as you can see in the demo, this blush is definitely buildable. You can easily do a light sheer layer. You can build it up, and it builds up just as easily with a fluffier brush as it does with a buffing brush. But I would have to say the Le Beige still build up to a deeper color than this newer blush duo. Now, if you look at the finishes very, very closely, you can see that the Le Beige have a little bit more of a creamier gel type texture to them. You can just see how that finishes on the skin versus the new one here, which is going to be a little bit lighter. I would say this builds up to about a medium intensity, whereas you can get quite deep with the light beige. So that's going to be your biggest difference there, aside from the finishes. Even our matte shades in the light beige have a little bit more of a satin hue to it, whereas this new duo is definitely going to be a little bit more of a true matte. Let's go ahead and move on to the new powder highlighter. Now, this is called Lumiere de l'Océan, and this is not quite what I expected at first because you can see this is going to be more of a chunky blue highlighter. Now, swatching it, I think, does not do it justice. I actually don't really like it swatched. I like it better on the face when you use a brush. But when you first swatch it, you can feel it has, again, a bit of that gel type texture, but there are chunks in there. So it's not the smoothest feeling highlighter. Overall, I like this highlighter more than I thought I would after I saw the initial swatch photos, but it's not a favorite of mine. So let's take a look at the demos. In the demos, I used two different style brushes. I used something a little bit smaller and fluffier versus something a little bit more dense. And I actually prefer the larger, denser brush because I feel like it gives a smoother finish to the skin. Doesn't look quite as chunky. This product has 8 grams of product in it, and it has an 18-month shelf life, and it's made in Italy. Now, this does not come with a brush, but it does come with a velour pouch. So just something to note there. And overall, you have kind of this white base with blue reflective glitter in there. I actually think it does give a nice hint of, a blue glow to the skin. And this is definitely something you can put on and then top it with blush if you want to make it a little bit more subtle. So let's just do a couple of quick comparisons here. This is the new Chanel Oversize Highlighters Les Symboles de Chanel in the pearly white. And you can see this also has that chunky finish to it. The white is going to be more white with a touch of gold in it. There's a tiny bit of white gold in there. But you can see that the formula for these is going to be pretty similar. However, I would have to say that the pearly white, notice that the color, the glitter, is slightly more finely milled than that in the new Lumiere de l'Océan. The glitter in the new one is a little bit larger, so the chunks are a little bit larger. They're also spaced out a little bit further apart. So I do like using a larger brush where you can kind of buff that in a little bit more because I think it helps with that. And then it can really give a nice luminescence. And this is the Duo Lumiere from the holidays. We're just going to swatch the lighter shade here because this is also going to be just slightly more finely milled than either of these, but yet we still have a very glittery product here. So you can see that it's a little bit more finely milled, but even so, we have more intense shimmer because of that. Now, Chanel also released a highlighter stick, one of the Baume Essentiels, and it's called Mermaid Glow. It looks beautiful. So that wasn't available when I did my initial pre-order, but I ended up deciding to pass on that just because I really love the Addiction highlighting sticks. I like that formula so much. So I wanted to share one from Addiction. This is in their permanent line. It's 001P Above the Moon. And I thought this was a nice substitute. What I like about these is you don't have any tacky texture whatsoever, and it really sinks into the skin. So this is a soft champagne. The Mermaid Glow, though, does have a little bit more like pink and gold reflect in there. So it's not going to be like a dupe of the shade, but I thought this complemented this collection very well. And let's just take a look at the new Rouge Allure Laque that I picked up. These are the liquid lipsticks from Chanel. There are 2 of these as well as 2 of the balms, the lip balms. And I decided just to pick up this one. So this is number 92 Seashell. You can see we have an angled wand here. And let's just put this one right here. This is what is on my lips right now. And you can see that it is a warm rosy nude. And I actually think is a great addition to this collection because it's something light to really let these other colors shine through. And I personally like the Laque formulas a lot. They can be sheer, they can be built up. They are a liquid lipstick, but they're very comfortable. They don't feel like your traditional liquid lipstick. And you can see how easy it is to apply this product. I would recommend shaking this before you use it, just to make sure everything is equally distributed before you put that on your lips. But you know, you really don't need much to get a full swatch of color, and you can put this on lightly for a sheer layer or build it up. We have an 18-month shelf life. It is made in France, and we have 5.5 milliliters. And I think this is a really great formula from Chanel that is often overlooked. So this is definitely one of my favorite lip formulas from Chanel. Now we're gonna go ahead and move on to what, in my opinion, are the stars of the collection, the eyeshadow quads. And I did pick up both of these. All right, so looking at the eyeshadow palettes, this is 78 Rivage, and this is my favorite of the two. So first up, we have kind of an opalescent shimmery shade here. So you can see that the tone of this is going to be more of a soft gold with little hints of like a little bit of pink in there, maybe even a little green. It's kind of hard to tell, but sometimes when the light hits it, you can see that. Now you can see that the texture of this is similar to that of the highlighter. So it is actually a little bit more finely milled than the highlighter. The highlighter is a little chunkier than this. But the highlighter looks gorgeous on the eyes. I really like it on the eyes. Then we have this blue. Now, the formulas for this eyeshadow palette, these eyeshadow palettes, both of them, are a little bit different. This is more of a like gel to powder type of formula, and you can see that the blue definitely has some presence. It's pretty easy to build up because of that gel to powder formula. Where you put it, it kind of sticks there, so you're gonna have to use a little bit more it has a little bit more resistance to moving with a brush at full force, so it'll blend out very easily. But if you want to build up that pigment, you definitely want to use something a little bit firmer or a finger or foam tip applicator. So then we have kind of this sandy champagne shade. And this is going to be a shimmery satin. And it's really thin and silky in texture. Then just like the blue, this matte brown, I mean, this is a really beautiful, kind of like a mousy brown shade. There's a little bit of warmth to it, but there's also some coolness to balance it out. So it's pretty neutral. It's going to be a soft brown shade. And as I was saying, just like the blue, this is kind of the same formula, kind of that gel to powder kind of texture there. It's almost like a dry or putty-like formula. So this is Rivage. I think it's a really beautiful palette. And I love how we have the pop of blue, but the other three shades are very neutral, very everyday. Now this one here is 88 Coral Treasure. And this one actually is just a little bit less everyday for my coloring, but we start off with kind of this pink toppery shade here. And you can see that this one is going to be the same formula as the first shade in the Rivage, but this time we have pink with some notes of like lilac in there. There's a little bit of a lilac shift to that. Really beautiful shade. And again, you can sheer this out and have just kind of that glittery topper, or you can build that up and get something more like the swatch. And then we have this light Mandarin Peach. And this is gonna be matte. It does have that similar like gel powder texture. This one feels a little bit drier though than the two I had in the Rivage quad, or than this last one here that we'll take a look at, and this pink one too. So the pink here is also gonna be this matte gel cream formula, same as the blue and the brown here in Rivage, slightly creamier than the Mandarin Orange. You can see our pink has some warmer undertones to it. That being said, it's a cool pink with warm undertones, making it pretty neutral. Our last shade here in the palette is going to be a little bit more of a deeper orange shade. And this one actually has a satin finish to it, but it still has that same gel powder texture to it. So this is Coral Treasure and Rivage. Let's take a look at the eye swatches and some demos while we talk about these. Both palettes are made in Italy. They have an 18-month shelf life and they have 2 grams of product. Now this whole collection was designed by the new creative team at Chanel. You can tell right away from the colors, the differences that we're seeing in the color stories, as well as the textures and finishes from all of the products in this collection, but definitely the eyeshadows. The eyeshadows, if you haven't heard already, Chanel is changing the formulas on all of their permanent palettes. If you go onto the Chanel website, you'll see that the permanent palettes are now marked limited edition. They will be replaced. So I'm curious to know whether this formula is what we are going to be seeing on the, basically as the new permanent formula. So I have to say, I do really like this formula. I think it's easy to use, easy to blend. It feels updated. It's a nice buildable texture and it's very smooth. It definitely feels more modern than some that we've seen from Chanel. I feel like Chanel's eyeshadow formulas over the past couple of years have been up and down. Some of them have been great, some of them not so great. So this one is definitely a nice one. Now, the Rivage palette, it was created for the Spring 2024 collection and inspired by Gabrielle Chanel's Love of the Ocean. The Harmony features 3 luminous, earthy colors reminiscent of both dry and wet sand, transparent with pink and golden shimmer, champagne and semi-matte taupe, as well as a contrasting satiny turquoise that echoes the hue of the sea. Now, the palettes in my demos, you can see I've really kind of worn off the embossing, but you could see in that little reel that I had at the beginning of the video that we have the double C monogram for Chanel, but it is kind of reimagined a little bit, and it's supposed to evoke the rippling of stones skipping across the water. So that's directly from the Chanel website. Now, the eyeshadow formulas are described as long-lasting mineral pigments that deliver a striking effect, while plant oils ensure a smooth texture for effortless application. These are ophthalmologist tested and suitable for contact lens wearers. So I think that's important to note, as we do have a change in the formula, but it is something we have come to expect in general from eyeshadow palettes. Now, the pink palette, the number 88 Coral Treasure, this was inspired by the radiance of oceanic flora and illuminates the gaze. Shades of lilac pink, soft coral, matte fuchsia, and satiny apricot create fresh, iridescent looks. And again, we have the same embossing that we did on many of the items in the collection here. Overall, I think both palettes are really beautiful. I think the formulas are great. I personally, for my personal color preferences, prefer the Rivage, but I do think in general, regardless of my color preferences, the Rivage is a slightly easier palette to use because we do have those 3 neutrals, whereas the Coral Treasure, we really focus more on those kind of like warmer oranges and pinks, which definitely look beautiful on certain skin tones. I think in general, like some medium deep and deeper skin tones, those work really beautiful as neutrals. But for lighter skin tones in general, I think our taupes and the sandy shades in the Rivage work better as neutrals. And I think these are both great palettes, but I do like the differences in all of the colors in the Rivage more so than the differences in the Coral Treasure. And what I mean by that is when we're looking at Coral Treasure, yes, we've got like the iridescent pink, we got the darker pink, but then we have those 2 orangey shades and they're different, but they're pretty close. I feel like they're a little bit too similar. And in the Rivage, we have a greater degree of difference in all of the shades. So that's what I mean by the Rivage being a better palette overall, because I do think that both color stories will have an audience where, one is definitely preferable over the other. But I think the level of contrast in the Rivage palette is stronger, making it overall a better palette in my opinion. Personally, I would have loved to have seen Chanel replace one of those more orange-based shades in Coral Treasure with a different color, perhaps even something like a lime green to represent seaweed or something like that. I just think it would have been a little bit more exciting, but I think both of them are great palettes. So overall, I'm happy with both of them, but I do prefer the Rivage. So let's go ahead and take a look at just a few comparisons. Now, I have a couple of Chanel palettes that we'll be looking at as well, but I actually feel like some of the Clé de Peau palettes were closer in comparison. So this is Rivage with the Clé de Peau blue palette, and that's called 11 Azure Blue Sea. So we're going to go ahead. This shade here is a primer shade. We're going to skip that one. We're actually just going to look at these 2 blues because the midnight blue, the navy blue, is definitely not going to be a comparison there. But you can see we have kind of more of a deeper teal We have a little bit more of a satiny powder blue. This shade's going to be closest to the Chanel, but it's kind of a mix of the two. You know what? Let's just go ahead and swatch the others just so you can get an idea of how this palette overall looks in comparison to the Chanel. So this is the Clé de Peau Azure Blue Sea versus the Chanel. I do really like how the Chanel has included the taupe, but I love the Clé de Peau as well. So I think they are both fantastic palettes, really beautiful. Now, the Chanel Coral Treasure made me think of this year's holiday palette from Clé de Peau. You can see it's got that beautiful limited edition packaging, which was also Mermaids. So I thought that was kind of interesting, both Mermaids here. And this is number 501, Visions of Radiance. So we have kind of this satiny orange shade here. We're going to put that one right there. And you can see that they are similar, but there's a little bit more yellow in the Chanel, a little bit more red in the Clé de Peau. We have kind of this warm satiny pink. It's going to be a little bit warmer and rosier in the Clé de Peau. And then our primer here is going to be a light pink. Can't really see that too much, but you do see a little bit of radiance there. And then our last shade here is actually going to be a warm brown with a little bit of red in there. So you can see they do have a similar color story there. So here are the two new Chanel palettes. And then this is the Chanel Peru Crystal that came out the end of 2023. This is one of the limited edition Byzance quads. So we're going to go ahead and swatch this one in comparison. The formula of this is different. This is going to be like a silky satin kind of texture. And you can see we have kind of these like nude peachy shades and then a cooler brown. And then the blue here is really just a very light topper, more of like, it's actually more akin to the highlighter because it has that stronger white base with a little bit of blue reflection. So you can see how much that contrasts with both of these palettes here. But it does have a little bit of something from each of them. And then I also wanted to take a look at 68 Jelissa. This came out last year for spring, and this is a Coral Treasure. So let's see how this one compares. And this is a very, very light palette. We're going to put this in the middle here in between the two palettes. You can see we start off with like a light lavender. It's got a pink base. And then we have kind of this peachy satin, and it's kind of a pinkier peach than the ones in Coral Treasure, which are going to be a bit more orangey. And then we have this deeper, more of like a rusty mauve and a yellow satin. So the color stories are definitely not the same, but I just wanted to show you how the spring collections kind of have altered with the new creative team. So those are my closest comparisons for the eyeshadows. Let's go ahead and go through my thoughts on every item in this collection. Now, this Chanel collection is supposed to evoke the spirit of the ocean and mermaids and so forth, and we definitely have some products that really do that. I do think that the highlighting stick, the Baume Essentiel and Mermaid Glow, looks beautiful. Again, I passed on that in favor of the Addiction highlighter stick. We also have a blue eyeliner from Chanel that I passed on in favor of this YSL Crush Liner number 6. This is permanent, and I just really love this kind of electric blue shade, and I personally prefer the YSL formula over the Chanel. The Chanel's a little drier, and all of the ones I bought actually ended up drying up pretty quickly, so I don't even have them anymore. I got rid of them. I'm not buying more of them. So I know some people have better luck with those, but I think the new formulation of the Cielo Ya, they just didn't work out for me. So this is the YSL Crush Liner in number 6, and that's what I have paired on my eyes right now with both of the eyeshadow palettes. And I think this really pairs well with the Rivage quad as well. So as for the highlighter itself, when I first swatched the Lumiere de l'Océan and I was doing the reel for this, I was not a huge fan of this. You know, you can see right off the bat it's pretty chunky. You got this blue glitter, and you could feel it when you're swiping it on your skin. You could feel the resistance from kind of that gel powder texture to it, and it just looked pretty chunky. But the more I use it, the more I actually do like it. And I think once you get past that top layer, it is a little bit more finely milled than what it looked like initially. However, I do think that application for this goes on best with a more dense brush. So in the demos, I used the Sonia G Detail Pro, which is a little bit fluffier. This will get you a really light wash of the highlight, but I find it is harder to get the glitter particles exactly where you want them. You know, with the Zen brush, this is a Chikuhodo Zen series highlighting brush. This is gonna be a little bit denser, and you kind of lay this here, and it's not that you can really control where the particles are going, but you are able to kind of smooth everything out. So you don't have anything that is not pressed against your skin and actually adhering to it. You know, it's not going to be anything powdery or any fallout from the highlighter there from the glitter. And I think it just gives a really beautiful finish. So I would recommend something that is a little bit less fluffy for applying the highlighter, but I think it really gives you a nice glow. And I'm not usually one to like these chunkier highlighters, and I still wouldn't say I love it, but I like it a lot more than I thought I would. And I think it's one that I actually will be wearing. And perhaps maybe, you know, to tone it down sometimes, I'll wear it and put the blush on top instead. So you don't really notice any chunks per se. But I do think that using a brush more with this shape where it's a little bit more firmly pressed, we have like more of an oval pinch ferrule here, that's going to allow it to lay a little bit better. And the chunks are, you know, it's not really chunky looking then, it's more shimmery looking. And so I have to say, I like the highlighter. It surprised me. Now, as for the blush duo, I figured this was going to be, I almost didn't get this one either because I did think it looked very similar to shades I already have. And yeah, I almost passed on this, but I have to say, I like this formula. The formula is a little different from that in the light beige. It's, you know, kind of like a gel powder texture as well, but it's a little bit more powdery than what we've seen with light beige. So it's really easy to pick up and get that lighter wash of color. So I actually think this one's easier to use for fair skin than the light beige ones because it shears out a little bit more easily. And I really like the matte finish on this. So the blush, you know, I have to say, I'm really impressed with the blush as well. Even though I do have similar shades, I think I actually preferred this one over the light beige ones. As for the Laque, by the way, this makeup has been on for about half a day already. I've had to film this in increments due to my schedule today. So you can see like it has worn very well. You still have like a bit of shine. This is probably about 4 hours right now since I last applied this. And you can see you still have some shine there. It's held up very nicely. I have, you know, had water and so forth since then. And I really like the Laques. So it's a really nice kind of a peachy rose nude. I think it's just a great neutral lip. And it really complements not just the Chanel Spring Collection, but pretty much anything. You know, it's one of those great, not quite a My Lips But Better look, but it's kind of in that general category. So I really like the Laque a lot. And I have the shade 92 Seashell. I would recommend that. And then we have the eyeshadow quads. Again, I really like the eyeshadow quads. I think the new formula is very nice. I'm curious to see how it holds up over time, but after feeling it and playing with it, you know, I do feel like this is not one that's going to end up getting like dried out or, you know, hard pan or anything like that. So I'm confident that this formula is going to be pretty good long term. And I actually wouldn't mind if this is what they went to with the new permanent eyeshadow palettes. So quite curious to see what happens with that line, but I really like them, in particular the Rivage. I love the iridescence that you get with the eyeshadows, and I really I like the combination of finishes. Now, I do like the combination of finishes in the Rivage a little bit more than the Coral Treasure, just because, I don't know, I feel like, you know, we've got this matte, we have more of a satin, and it's a pretty shimmery satin. And then our blue here is kind of more of a softer satin matte. Whereas these three are going to be a little bit more similar. We have this satin here, but these two are both going to be more of that satin matte finish. And again, these two shades are pretty similar. So I'm really happy with both of the eyeshadow palettes. As a matter of fact, I think this whole collection really impressed me, and I'm very eager to see where the new creative team is going to be going this year. I'm looking forward to a lot of great releases. Now, that being said, a lot of Chanel's customer base is really used to more of those like classic shades, more like neutrals and so forth. And sometimes we've had some pops of color, but we really haven't had too many fun and playful things like we have in these two new palettes. So, you know, that's something to note. If you are somebody who does not love all of the different like playful looks and so forth, and you really want to try an eyeshadow palette, I'd recommend the Rivage over this one, just because you can leave out the blue and then you've got a nice everyday neutral palette as well. So overall, I think they really did a great job, and I'm very excited for future collections coming out now. So I have no regrets for anything that I purchased from this collection. I'm really happy with everything. I'd love to know your thoughts on this collection, whether you've tried any of these yet, what you're interested in, and if you have that highlighting stick, I'd love to know your thoughts on that one, because that one, I'm still having a little bit of FOMO over that one. But I keep reminding myself there's always something new coming out. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you very soon.